Atheist Talk on KTNF AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Good morning to all of you joining us locally by radio and streaming online. We appreciate you tuning in. Today is Sunday, April 29th, 2018, and I'm your host, Hertzie Hertz. I'm joined in studio with Maddie Love and Scott Lohman, and on Skype, our special guest, Callie Wright from the Atheist Manifesto. Today, we're going to talk about Star Trek. Star Trek premiered in September of 1966 with a 3-year run for its first portion. This futuristic universe was set in space, exploring the universe. It's also tackled a lot of issues considered too controversial for normal TV. And it had a suspicious lack of religion. So today we're going to talk about Star Trek and its effects on our lives and the culture itself. This is an open conversation, and we welcome and encourage listener interaction with your phone calls to 952-946-6205, your emails to radio@mnatheist.org, or tweet us at @atheisttalk. The phone number is only available when we are live, but you can always email or tweet whether we're live or you're listening to the podcast. Maddie, Scott, Callie, welcome to Atheist Talk.
Hello, hello.
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 Hello. So, Star Trek, The Next Generation. Well, okay, actually just Star Trek.
Yep, we have to go back to that.
We have to go back to all of them.
Yep.
All right, so first let's just go through the iterations. So you have Star Trek, the original series.
Yep.
You have The Next Generation.
Actually, you missed Star Trek, the animated series.
I did miss Star Trek, the animated series.
Yep, and then we got to come...
We're already screwing things up.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, that's why I'm here. Then the first couple of the original series movies.
Yes.
And Next Generation came out in 1987.
I was 4.
Yep, and then Deep Space Nine came out in 93.
Yep. Then
Voyager
Voyager
in 95, and then Enterprise in 2000, and now Star Trek Discovery in 2017. Those are the series. And then there's the J.J. Abrams movies, which are the Kelvin universe, and those came out in first one in 2009 on that, and then we're 2 years after that. And at this point, there's talk of 2 different new Star Trek movies, one with the Abrams cast and another one currently in talks. So, yeah, Star Trek is alive and well at the ripe old age of 52, or coming up on 52. It'll be 52 in September, if you go by air date.
I was going to say, that actually brings up an interesting question then, because would then they... No, I don't think it's on longer than Doctor Who. Okay.
Nope, Doctor Who has it by...
3 years, I think.
Nope, 63 is when Doctor Who premiered.
Yeah, and this one came out in 66.
66.
The 3 years difference.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see here. Let's start with which of these is you guys' favorite series? Callie, do you want to start?
I'm going to get murdered.
Ooh.
You're going to say Enterprise, aren't you?
No, I was going to say,
No,
I think I have an idea. I think I have an idea which one is her favorite.
Who the hell do you think I am? Oh, my gosh,
nobody
no.
says Enterprise.
No, DS9 is my favorite.
That's what I thought you were going to say. You're not going to get murdered.
And, okay. Well, so it's not as unpopular an opinion as I thought to have DS9 as a favorite. I was kind of surprised because, I mean, like, the default is everybody's like, oh, original series or next gen, or like, who's the best captain, Kirk or Picard? And like, my favorite way of answering that question, like, okay, Kirk, Picard, Sisko. Actually, Sisko is the answer to that question. So by far, DS9 is my favorite. Next gen is like the closest to my heart because it's the one that I got into Star Trek on and kind of grew up with.
Yep.
And I grew up without a dad, so Captain Picard was very much a father figure for me. But if I'm looking at what stories I think are the best social commentary, the best of what Star Trek is to me, then I think DS9 is hands down the best of them.
Awesome. And
definitely on that. I don't let anybody nail me down. Period. I like all Star Trek, and I will defend section of Enterprise as well as even Star Trek Nemesis. So that's
same. Honestly,
that is how hardcore I am. I mean, I can easily just throw something in. The nice thing about Netflix is if I don't have enough time to watch a full hour or something, they have the animated series on Netflix, so I can go in and watch the anime. 22 minutes, it's wonderful. Has it was the only Star Trek that won the Peabody Award, which for really good television on that is the animated series. And the episode was written by a Native American and talks about gods.
Interesting. We'll come back. We'll put a pin on that.
Yeah.
Maddie,
Yeah,
do you
I like, not love Enterprise, and I actually enjoy all of the Next Gen movies. Like it's cool to say like, oh, First Contact was good, Generations was okay, but Nemesis and Insurrection were terrible. And no, like I think Nemesis and Insurrection were great Star Trek episodes, maybe not great movies, but I still really like watching them.
Oh, yeah.
I actually liked Insurrection. Admittedly, I couldn't watch Nemesis because the idea with some of the stuff they're doing, I was like, I feel like this is jumping a bit of a shark.
Yeah, but I love Tom Hardy in that movie.
Yeah, Tom Hardy's a lot of fun to watch in that.
Yeah, so. He's gorgeous. Like acting ability. I mean, he's pleasant to look at too. But like his acting is just so beautiful in that.
Yeah, because he's good, and especially go watch him in Peaky Blinders.
All right, Maddie, do you have a favorite series?
I'm boring. The Next Generation, because like I'm old enough that I could have seen at least the original Star Trek in syndication, because I was born in '77, but I didn't really first get into Star Trek until I was watching The Next Generation. So I think that will always. And my favorite episode, like in there, like when I saw The Measure of a Man, that was like that like sealed it. It's like, yep, I love this show.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Kelly, actually, I'm very similar to you, where Next Gen is the one that's closest to my heart, because that was the one that literally, that was the first time Dad was like, oh my gosh, sit down and watch this thing. And I was like, okay, I'm bored. And oh my gosh, it's a giant jellyfish in space. I was 4, so it was a little, it took a little to get into it. But yeah, so, but admittedly, if my absolute favorite, I love Janeway. So Voyager really, also when I watched Voyager, I was in a very odd place. I was at an Assembly of God college. And so that was one of my escapes, was at 2 a.m. They were showing Voyager. And I was like, please, I need this.
Yeah, that's legit. I don't have anything. I mean, I think Voyager was probably the most inconsistent of the series, but I still love it. And I still love Janeway as a character.
Oh, her character is great fun. The couple of the episodes where basically she takes charge, I think it's macrocism was where the giant spore things have taken over Voyager, but the
macrovirus.
Yeah, the macrovirus, but she had gotten in trouble with doing negotiations with these aliens because they do hand gestures at the same time, and putting the hands on the hips is apparently the equivalent of something really bad in this culture, and it caused a bit of a schism for a while. That I just loved, because that's her entire approach, is like, fine, you guys are, she was the tough captain. She was the one that says, I'll ask nice first, and then after that I'm punching. So that's what I liked about Janeway.
And I think that Janeway gets, I think Janeway gets a lot of flack that I don't think she really deserves, which is, it's always confusing to me, because I'm like, no, she was a good captain. She kept her, she was in the middle of nowhere with literally nothing to fall back on. She couldn't court-martial somebody, really. So, I mean, holding the crew together like that is pretty awesome.
Well, I've heard people argue that Janeway is somewhat of a monster because of Tuvix. Like, she basically killed Tuvix. And I'm like, God, I can't argue against that. Like, I it's hard for me to say that I would have acted differently, but still, like, that's just that introduces some ambiguity there for me.
Well, but I mean, didn't Tuvix kill both Tuvok and Felix or Neelix?
Neelix, yes. Yeah. It was a combination of the two.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of those where there's, like you were saying, there's a lot of ambiguity on there, because it's like you can bring them back, but you are getting rid of a thing. And
it makes for great discussions. That's what Trek is good for.
And that's what I love about Star Trek is, especially in the original series, I know, and a bit in the Next Gen and DS9 and Voyager, they did bring a lot of these kind of questions to the front. Maddie, you talked about Measure of a Man. Scott, I know you know the episode name, but the one where they had the two people, one had like black on one side.
Let this be your last battlefield.
Yeah, that one, which tackled the idea of racism.
And so pokes fun at it and talks about it seriously at the same time. Because they're going, well, we're different. And they go, you're black on one side and white on the other. Oh, he's black on this side and I'm black on that side. So there. And just pointing out that's like, yeah, that totally shows what an incredibly stupid argument that is.
Oh, yes. So what is everyone's favorite episode?
Oh my God! Do we have 3 hours?
Yeah, that's really tough, because I classify it by series and sometimes even go down to seasons, because
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that, well, see,
Okay.
keep in mind, some of us are hardcore.
Well, in different
Close.
categories too, because
Okay,
there's
that's
like
true.
there's my favorite episode of social commentary. There's
Yep.
my favorite episode of like just sort of like awesome sci-fi-ness, and there's my favorite character development episodes. There's different categories.
There's ones you just put in for just plain fun.
Oh, yeah. All right,
Absolutely.
So which one would you say is your favorite for social commentary?
Oh, that's so tough because there's good ones. But I look at, the dark, really as far as dark is in the Pale Moonlight from Deep Space Nine.
Oh my God, that's exactly what I was going to say.
And that one talks about, you're talking about really tough ethical and moral decisions here where they're in the middle of a war. They're kind of not quite winning, but they're not quite losing, and they need to get more help. So how do you bring in a side that doesn't really want to join you, when you've ethically asked them questions? And so you employ the guy who looks upon human ethics as annoyances and have them do that. So the interaction between Sisko and Garak, that entire episode, is just wonderful stuff, talking about how to be involved in that kind of thing.
Oh, yes. All right. Well, we are going to have to actually go to the break. Sorry about that. We'll pick this up in just a moment with Maddie and Scott here in studio and Callie on Skype. I'm Hertzie Hertz. You're listening to AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. Welcome back to AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota. You're tuned in to Atheist Talk, and I'm your host, Hertzie Hertz. I'm in studio talking to today's guests, Maddie Love and Scott Lohman, and on the Skype was Callie Wright. Before we get back, however, I want to remind everyone listening live that immediately following this program, you can listen to American Atheist Viewpoint, an official production of American Atheists. Please note, you can always catch American Atheist Viewpoint by subscribing to the podcast version in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or the podcast player of your choice. As for the here and now, if you'd like to get involved in the conversation with Maddie, Scott, and Callie, you can call us at 952-946-6205, email us at radio@mnatheist.org, or tweet us at atheisttalk. Maddie, Scott, Callie, welcome back.
Thank you.
Hey.
All right. So we were talking about our favorite social commentary episode. And we had I believe you said In the Pale Moonlight.
Yep, from Deep Space Nine.
All right. So then what is your favorite just kind of for fun episode?
Oh, hang on. There's so much more to say about In the Pale Moonlight.
Okay, we'll go back. We'll go back.
Okay, so for context, they're deep in the war. Like Scott was saying, they're deep in the war. Things aren't going so well. They're not like on the cusp of defeat, but they can definitely see things turning that way. And they're like, okay, we need a new ally. And we think that our enemy is so the Romulans have signed this non-aggression pact, which means that they're not allies, but they're not enemies. They're just not going to get involved, right? And they're convinced because of the Dominion, who the Dominion is, they're going to betray you at some point. It's just a matter of time.
Which makes sense.
Right. But if there's proof of that, it's buried forever away and we'll never get to it. But we have to have them as an ally, right? So they hatched this plan to bring the Romulans into the war by just trying to convince them. And when convincing them doesn't work, it's like, okay, you know what? We're going to lie to them. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Everything that we know about the Federation says that's not what we do, right? We hold to our ideals, honesty, integrity. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth, right? We learned that from Captain Picard. But we have Captain Sisko who is like, okay, but if we hold to that, we can lose literally everything. Like we can lose the Federation itself. And so the question is, do you compromise your morality when your very existence is at stake? And of course the answer is yes. But that's a really tough reality to confront, right? And so, I mean, spoiler alert, it's 25 years. If you haven't seen it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
But
I should have put that at the beginning of the episode.
You have a Starfleet officer who ends up complicit in the assassination of a Romulan official to bring the Romulans into the war. And at the end of the episode, basically the impact line is, you know what? I can live with that.
Yep.
And it's just like, wow. Like it's so like it's very Star Trek, right? In that it explores these really tough questions, but it's also not Star Trek because that's very not utopian. You know what I mean?
I think DS9 did a great job of just kind of piercing that utopian veil a little bit, which was kind of good.
It did that wonderfully, and that's what I like about Deep Space Nine. And what's really cool is within the next year or so, I'm not sure the exact date, there'll be a documentary coming out that's being produced by Stephen Bear, who was the writing producer for Deep Space Nine its entire run. He's the one that helped us sort of refigure the Ferengi into more of a humorous sort of nemesis, as opposed to they originally were going to replace like the Klingons and the Romulans as being nasty, and their first appearance was, shall we say, not good.
Yeah.
I remember that episode.
Yep. The rest of the episode was really good. That was during first season Next Gen, and the pilot was good. The first episode out was iffy. The second episode out was extremely iffy. And then we got to The Last Outpost, which was that one. It's like, okay, without the Ferengi, everything else in this episode is really good stuff.
Yeah. I don't know. That little energy whip thing is total awesome, right?
It was really cool, but that was pretty much the only time they used it. So
yeah, I don't think I ever saw it again.
Except the Marauder Mo action figures and DS9 had them. If you noticed, when they're at Quark and Rom's mom's house, they have Marauder Mo action figures, and Marauder Mo has a light whip in his hand. Awesome. The action figure does. It's great.
Oh my god, that's adorable.
Yep, they had such fun in the background.
Oh, so I'm going to go just to the tech for a little moment, because Star Trek was, very, in its own ways, very forward thinking about, what kind of tech and stuff. Sometimes with interesting reasons. But what tech do you desperately want to be real, Callie?
Oh, warp drive.
Yeah.
Warp drive or the holodeck / replicators, because they're kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I have to go with replicators. Oh, sorry, Callie, I interrupted.
No, you're okay. You're okay. I had a deep philosophical discussion about transporters, and I think I'm terrified of transporting. So I'm gonna say, if that one happens, cool. Probably not gonna be my thing. But yeah, like replicators / holodecks or warp drive.
Yeah, warp drive to get us out of here.
Callie, I'm going to start. Callie, I'm going to start calling you Bones.
Or Barkley.
Oh gosh, yes.
There we go. Yep.
I like the idea of replicators almost more than warp drive, but I'm also seeing the downside if you can replicate. Like, I'm looking at it from replicating food and replicating stuff for housing and basic needs, and then I'm also thinking, but replication of weapons, replication of instruments of war, and like.
There is that, but one of the big things that I love about replicators is that it takes the things that we don't need anymore and breaks it down to its molecular and I think atomic structure and rebuilds it. And so, think of all the waste that we have and imagine it being all gone.
Oh, I think I'd still go with replicators.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of those. Like, I'm only thinking of the good, but there is probably a bad side somewhere too.
Well, and there's
absolutely,
and there's not great stuff about warp drive too.
Right. But the trick is that it then gives us an escape valve, because right now leaving the solar system is going to take hundreds of years on the lucky side, and we need technology that would be able to work that long. Much less still be useful at the end of that time period in order to even get a couple of people out of our star system.
That is true. So we're gonna go back to the whole thing is Star Trek, but I have this list of kind of questions thing. I know it's like this is very friendly discussion. So, but Maddie has this awesome question. What was I think Callie, you and I think we both grew up with it. Scott, I don't know how old you were when you first watched it.
I was not even 10.
Okay, cool. So great. We all got answers for this. Star Trek as a child, what was your first experiences with the show? Callie?
Okay, so the first time I saw Star Trek was in the run-up to the season 4 premiere, which was part 2 of The Best of Both Worlds, and of Next Gen.
Yeah.
And so there was a Star Trek marathon that was a best of all the episodes leading up to this, and then it played part 1 of Best of Both Worlds and then part 2. And so that was my introduction. I just happened to be at my grandma's house watching TV randomly. She didn't have cable, she just had broadcast TV, so it was just there's spaceships and aliens, this is kind of interesting. And I watched it, and so I was immediately hooked as a kid on that. And then not too long after that, I saw the episode The Outcast, which is this episode that has great commentary on gender and sexuality. And as a kid, knowing on whatever level I knew that I was trans, like that spoke to me, because it's like, oh, this, aside from being sort of a curiosity, this is not a big deal to the people on the Enterprise. And that started to give me the idea, like, oh, the world of Star Trek is a world in which, like, it's not only okay to be different, but in a lot of ways it's cool to be different. And like, I know I'm different, and so like this is a world that I can exist happily in. And so that was the initial draw for me. So it was very much a mix of all of that plus spaceships and aliens.
All right, well, you will have to join back after the break so that we can hear Scott and I's first experiences with Star Trek. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to American Atheists on AM 950 KTNF. I'm your host, Hertzie Hertz, and we are having what I would classify as a fascinating conversation with Maddie Love, Scott Lohman, and Kelly Wright. Before we continue this conversation, which will be our final segment with Maddie, Scott, and Kelly, there's a bit of housekeeping I need to attend to. Atheist Talk is producing with funding from the Minnesota Atheists and Cucumbers Restaurant in Edina, Minnesota. Please consider visiting our sponsors, and if you do, let them know that you appreciate their support of Atheist Talk. If you'd like to advertise on this program and keep us on the air, please contact us at radio@mnatheist.org. I also want to note the group of dedicated volunteers, including the two in the studio with me, and the generous donations of you, our listeners. You keep Atheist Talk on the air and in podcast form. I also want to note our donors of the week, which is all of you, because you are all awesome. And if you're able to help with a donation, please consider doing so at our Radio Fund page or at our Patreon at www.patreon.com/atheisttalk. Minnesota Atheists is a 501c3 tax-deductible organization, and we couldn't do the show without you, and we deeply appreciate your support. Music for Minnesota Atheists is by composer and member Brent Michael Davis and is used with permission. Please note all opinions are of the guests and hosts only and do not necessarily reflect those of Minnesota Atheists organization. As always, check out the Minnesota Atheists website for podcasts of previous programs. You can browse articles, book reviews, and peruse a calendar of upcoming events. You can also sign up for the American Atheist Weekly email, or the Atheist Weekly email, and which will give you links to upcoming events. It's a great way to stay connected in the community. If you enjoy this show and all that Minnesota Atheists has to offer, consider becoming a member of Minnesota Atheists while you're on the website. Membership has some great perks. Check out the website for the how and why. With all this relevant and very useful information out of the way, let's get back to Star Trek.
And I want to make one comment to Callie about the Outcast, is that Jonathan Frakes actually was a little annoyed that they cast the other character as female rather than a male.
I know.
He wanted to do that.
One of my favorite things.
To make it an even stronger point on that. That didn't scare him at all doing it that way. He was actually annoyed that they did it that way.
I love that man even more now.
I know. I'm just like, I fully admit I had a crush on Jonathan Frakes when I was a kid because I started Star Trek when I was 4 years old. And it's one of those, I was like, it's like I see him now and he's like, oh, that's nice that he's doing stuff. Now it's like, oh, okay, he's cute again.
I read that a long time ago, and I actually had the chance to meet him very briefly at a convention, and I wanted to thank him for that. And I opened my mouth to start talking, and instead just started crying and just squeaked out "thank you" and walked away. So
that's adorable.
I
Yes,
was gonna say that sounds about right.
Yeah, and he's also signed to direct a couple more episodes of Discovery. So
nice.
Yeah, they said it was quite fun when he was on directing the episode he did on Discovery because they're such new kids on the block. They were having fun talking to us. They put it one of the gods of Star Trek. Anyway, we've got to move on. We got lots to cover in no time.
Yes. All right. So we were talking about first experiences, and Callie, you gave yours. So Scott.
Yeah, mine goes back to watching it on the when the original series was on the air. I cannot remember what was my first episode on that because it would have been catching it probably before. It would have had to have been second season. And before it got moved to Friday nights at 9, which is the death slot for season 3, because that's when all their target audience was wandering off. But most part, I remember being able to watch it daily on early syndication. And so it was just nice to catch that. Although my fun story with syndication is while I got to know the series, got to know it so well, I could identify the original cuts as opposed to the remastered versions. Within 10 seconds, I would know which episode it was, and that just annoys my mother no end on that part. But that's how good I am with the original series on that part. So, but there was also a scene I never saw until the episodes were released on videotape, and this is from Shore Leave, and it's the sequence with the rabbit. That was always cut from syndication to add more commercial time during that, and I never saw the rabbit. So I said, they just refer to the damn rabbit because you didn't see any pictures. But then it's like, oh, it's actually there. This is cool. I'll finally see it.
Maddie, do you have an introduction story?
My very first Star Trek experience caused me to not want to watch it for a long time because I was very young, and I was staying up late, and I was watching the episode or the second movie, Wrath of Khan. And it was just the beginning where they're pulling the stuff. I don't remember what they're called now.
The SETI eels.
Yeah, and putting them in their ear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I got in trouble because I screamed really loud, ran it, and then I couldn't step over. That's what when we were monsters under the bed as kids. It was those that were under my bed.
Of course, yep,
Oh.
Yep, because they're scary monsters.
So I didn't watch Star Trek again until Next Generation.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, I saw Wrath of Khan on widescreen, so
that scene still creeps me out. I can't. I close my eyes.
Okay. So.
As I already went through mine, I was 4 years old and got to watch Encounter at Farpoint. So here's an interesting, because Star Trek, I mean, it's in a sense coming back with J.J. Abrams and the Discovery and such, but J.J. Abrams definitely seemed to take the Star Trek almost, it seems, in a different way. There doesn't seem to be the story bite. It wasn't. And then I'm going to bring in Star Trek's worst enemy here, Star Wars, which seems to actually have taken up that bite. How do you guys feel about that interesting potential change? I'm not talking Discovery, just the J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, that is nice, but because they did have it in there, but it's so quick. Because Captain Pike is talking to the young Kirk and going, well, you know what Starfleet's about. It's humanitarian doing this. And it's then they're off back on adventure because they're looking at more. We saw it actually a little more in Star Trek Beyond because then Simon Pegg did the script on that one, and we got to see a little more of Star Trek's philosophy in that showing up in that. But to me, the thing I appreciate for the Abrams ones is that it reinvigorated interest in the entire franchise. Because when that movie opened, it made $200 million before the end of July when it opened in May. And my wife and I go to bookstores as dates because we like books. And so after that one premiered, the half price stores did not have any of the Star Trek films on the shelf when we'd show up, and they didn't start showing back up in the shelves until August of that summer. So to me, that movie did what I wanted it to do, was to re-show that Star Trek at that point at about the ripe old age of 47 was not going to fade into the darkness. And they did it with the original characters and showing that, yes, they can bring that part of the franchise back to life without even starting a new set of characters like we're seeing in Discovery, and showing that, yes, there's still life in the concept.
Callie?
Yeah, a lot of really hardcore Star Trek fans do not like the J.J. Abrams movies, and I can't even necessarily argue with them and tell them that they're wrong. I did enjoy the J.J. Abrams movies. I don't like them for the same reasons I like other Star Trek. They're very much more just hey, we're spaceships and aliens and space battles and future and sci-fi, and there's a lot less of what I actually like about Star Trek in there. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just I don't like it for the same reasons. So yeah, when people say I hate them, I'm like, yeah, I understand why. I just don't hate them.
Yeah, for me, it's it's great eye candy. I do agree. It did reinvigorate that idea of Star Trek and such. But I just find it interesting that it's Star Wars has kind of taken that controversial edge in some ways, or at least that's the one that everyone's yelling about when it comes to trying to be progressive.
No, and so we're yelling about you can't transport to another planet.
Yeah, well there's a lot of things to discuss. That's a whole other 3 shows if people want to get deep into the weeds on that one.
I know. And
yeah.
We only have 5 minutes left right now.
Yes.
Callie, would you be okay with doing some extra content after this?
Sure.
Awesome.
Was that a tease for anybody listening right now that they should become a patron?
That is a tease. You get extra content, and sometimes we geek, and sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
So real quick, we should probably hit a little bit on the factor that Star Trek really didn't have a whole lot of religion in it. And Kelly, did that ever affect your being an atheist at any point?
Ish. So I remember thinking as a kid, there's that episode of Next Gen Evolution where Barkley has that genetic defect that like ends up with everyone de-evolving. And I remember as a kid, when I watched that episode, I was still a Christian, and I was thinking like, oh, this is cute, but they're going to feel real silly when they figure out evolution's not real. And then, but there was definitely an element of like in Who Watches the Watchers, where Picard calls leaving religion behind an achievement. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, what are they trying to say here? And like that is kind of part of what made me think about getting past all of that. Well, one thing anyways.
Yeah, in the original series, Roddenberry deliberately did not put a chaplain on the Enterprise. He was asked, and he fought that. And so you can see his opinions on religion even showing up in the original series with Return of the Archons, looking at the Apple, basically using computers as stand-in for God at a lot of points, with humans doing that. And going back to Star Trek, the animated series, on that episode, How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth, is basically there's a really powerful being who happens to resemble the god Quetzalcoatl. And he's shown up back in Star Trek's times going, why didn't you guys tell me to come back? And basically at this point they're saying, sorry, we don't need you. We've managed to grow up all by ourselves.
And there's an annoying reference to religion in Voyager when in the episode Sacred Ground, where Kes gets like knocked out and almost killed by this energy field.
Actually, it's Neelix. Sorry.
Nerd fight! And we love it.
Scott, you got to put your finger on your glasses when you do that.
There we go. Yeah. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and Janeway has to go on this quest to meet and like convene with the gods to try and plead her case. Yeah, you are, because
okay.
It's Kes.
There's a different one where Neelix dies and comes back. I'm mixing the two up.
Scott, for shame.
Yeah. So, and so basically, Janeway has this moment where she's like, "Oh my gosh, maybe their gods are real," and she just like gives herself into faith. And then she gets back to Voyager after it's all over with, and everybody's giving her like, "Oh, here's the scientific explanation for what happens." And Janeway's like, "Oh yeah, that's super logical, but like it was probably just their gods." And I was like, "No, like that's not who you are." Like, and I get what they were trying to do, but.
That's one of the points with DS9 that always was a little odd for me, is like, because in the first episode of DS9 they kind of explain what the prophets are, and they come back and everyone on Bajor is kind of like, oh no, we still believe they're gods. And I'm looking going, but you have the thing. How does this
Well, and with the Q continuum, like what does any god that's in any religion do that Q can't do, or that the continuum can't do?
I would say have empathy, but the Christian God really doesn't have that either.
Which then gets to one of my favorite Voyager episodes, which is Death Witch, which is what goes on when an immortal creature wants to die.
Oh yeah.
And it's a great discussion about the afterlife, where they use a gas station on a road in the desert, and they talk about the afterlife. And it's like, oh, that's such a wonderful metaphor on that, because they talk about, well, you can go down to that end of the road and to that end of the road, or you can even be the Scarecrow, which they had one of those on there. So, talking about that, it just goes on forever, and it's all boring. And unfortunately, now we're out of time.
Oh, well, we got 45 seconds. Well, thank you, Scott, Callie, and Maddie for joining us. We will definitely have an extended episode for anyone who's on Patreon. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Only $1 an episode.
Oh, yes. But I am proud to be on the air with Minnesota Atheists, and I hope that you enjoyed the show. The show depends on your generous supportive members, our sponsors, and our donors, and our volunteers. Please consider supporting the show through the donation link. And this has been Atheist Talk on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota.